Hi again then guys, and welcome to another look back into the past of the Forza franchise, once again to Forza Motorsport 3 in particular, and this time we're taking a look at a car which I didn't used to use a huge amount, but it is definitely a car which is worth taking a look at and maybe driving once in a while, maybe in free run, if not actually purchasing it, on Forza 3, because this is the newest Forza game to feature the car. Now this is a perfect rival in many ways to the Cadillac CTS-V race car which I discussed before in this same series, the Pirelli World Challenge car. That is a very good touring car, a very good race car in general, and a perfect rival for this one. In fact, they're the same kind of racing vehicle. Now there are two equivalents to that Cadillac from Audi. You've got the Champion Racing RS6, which is of course this one, and the Champion Racing S4, which is smaller, lighter, I would say potentially an even better car, but also a far less powerful one. Now, both of these Audis are a little bit cheaper than the Cadillac. That car is 180 grand, these are both 150. So, pretty well priced. That is quite a good price for a touring car, a lot cheaper than say a GT class machine, and yet similar performance to one, in some cases at least. Now, as far as what you get from this car, you've got a 4.2 litre engine, just like the road car, and funnily enough, you still have all-wheel drive, again like the road car. In both the S4 and RS6 versions, you still have that, which is an interesting advantage, or a potential advantage, over the Cadillac, especially for less experienced drivers. Now, the weight is still fairly high. As I said, this one is heavier than the S4, and it's also heavier than the Cadillac as well. That car weighs 1,361 kilos, both of the Audis are heavier. The S4 is just over 1,380, this one is 1,428. So that's quite a lot. That's a pretty hefty race car, but at the same time it's a different class and many of the cars do weigh a little bit more. Now, as far as increases in stuff like power and torque, it is improved over the road car. You've got just under 500 horses, 496 to be exact, 409 pound-feet of torque. So that's pretty good, especially with all-wheel drive, and of course about, 300-ish kilos less than the road car, something like that. So that's pretty good. Obviously you've got more downforce as well, better tyres, and still retain the all-wheel drive advantage. So overall, at least on paper, it looks like a pretty good deal. 150 grand for a car with this kind of potential. Almost something which, if you didn't know any better, you could conclude is some kind of cross between rally car and touring car. It does kind of seem like that. So what's it actually like to drive? Well, the RS6 in its road form is a very good super saloon or super wagon in its estate form, but at the same time it's not the most nimble of super saloons. Something like a BMW M5, or even on some occasions others too, like the Lexus LFA or the Cadillac CTS-V even, they can outmaneuver it because it's a heavy car, it's a big car, it's of course a luxury car, so it's going to be heavy, but also the all-wheel drive gives it a significantly different handling style to almost all of its rivals, because almost all of the other super saloons are rear-wheel drive. The M5 is, its equivalent Mercedes-AMG models are, the Lexus is, of course the Cadillac is, and a number of other models too. Now in road form that's okay, because they're all big, powerful, torquey, relatively heavy cars, so you don't really notice cornering ability as much, because let's face it, the cars can take corners, but in real-life applications, most owners of those cars will probably never see a track day. That's the unfortunate truth, because many of those guys or girls who buy those cars, they don't care about going on a track day. They just want a big, powerful, luxury car. Many of them might be businessmen or businesswomen, and they just don't care. They just want something powerful to fly down the autobahn in. That's fair enough. But that means that the car, by definition, doesn't need to take corners like a Lotus. Of course not. If it can, then that would be a benefit, but it's often not a necessity or not a requirement. Which is why something like a BMW M5, for instance, stands out so much. People love the way that car performs because BMW does go the extra mile, and they do try and make it great around corners. Not necessarily the fastest of any kind of performance car on the road around corners, but at least trying to lead the pack in terms of handling and driver feedback, whereas something like a big Mercedes-AMG, as much as I love Mercedes cars, let's face it, they're not cornering machines. They've got so much power and so much torque, they're essentially just muscle cars, really. Luxury muscle cars. They can take a corner, but they're much more happy doing so sideways than they are putting down a good lap time. Likewise with something like a big Dodge Charger SRT8, or many other equivalent size and power super saloons or sedans. Then you've got something like the Beamer, or this one, the Audi. They do take a different approach. But with the Beamer, they take more of a sports car approach, and it pulls it off pretty well, whereas with the RS6, the RS6's all-wheel drive serves as a help and a hindrance, because the all-wheel drive gives you so much more grip, which in the real world is great. In inclement weather, it's fantastic. If you hit a rough patch on the road, it's of course brilliant. It gives you so much more grip in just daily driving conditions, let alone performance conditions, but on a game, all that we really care about is how fast it can take a corner, and sometimes that is where the help can become the hindrance. Because with something like an Audi, they like to have their cars very close to, if not a 50-50 split, when it comes to grip. That can be good, but it can also make them very heavy. And of course you can change it. If you make it something like a 70-30 split, or even a 20-80, you can change that considerably. And that's pretty much always what I do with most of my all-wheel drive cars, if not all of them, because it allows you to have that extra bit of grip at the front end, but at the same time handles for the most part more like a rear-wheel drive car. That's, to me, the best of both worlds, and that is the number one thing that you need to be careful of in both the S4 and this RS6, because compared to something like the Cadillac, they are not as quick through flowing corners, because they do have that understeer. Now, in really low speed corners, like hairpins, you can do interesting stuff with an all-wheel drive that you couldn't in the Cadillac. If you pull the e-brake, or the handbrake as we call it in Europe, in the Cadillac, you're just going to start wheel spinning. You'll probably just come to a halt. In the Audis, you can pull the handbrake and full-on drift, almost Gymkhana style, around something like a hairpin turn, and it can make all the difference. Of course, that's not a professional way of driving it, but it is a game, after all, and I personally like to use that kind of driving style with all-wheel drive race cars. So it can be an advantage, but it's just something that you need to bear in mind as a caution. It's not a bad handling car by any stretch. It's actually a very forgiving car, one of the best beginner-friendly examples, I would say, of a powerful race car, because this manages to both be a genuinely fast car, but also a very beginner-friendly one, because it's big, it's heavy, it's planted, and there's tons of grip. So if you're less experienced at driving cars like this, give it a try. But even then, I might, to be honest, recommend the S4 over this one, because that one's even lighter and more nimble. But we'll get to that car another time. But that's it overall for this particular pick. Certainly a car that is worth checking out, and it's on a couple of different Forza games as well. But that's it for this pick, as I said. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.